I'm James Swanwick. This is the Alcohol Free Lifestyle Podcast, where you learn to live a life of health, wealth, love, and happiness.
Hi, this is the Alcohol Free Lifestyle Podcast, and I'm Sarah Connelly, recording today on the topic of surprising things that you may not know about alcohol. We feel like we do know, I think, a lot about this substance, but when I look at what I now know, I wonder if I'd ever would have started drinking it if I'd had all the information. When I was young and first exposed to alcohol, it was presented to me as a very sophisticated thing to do. My parents were members of a town twinning program, and our small village in the UK was partnered with a village in France, just outside of Paris. And we would go over to France one year, and the family would come over to us the following year. The first time we went, I remember very clearly walking out onto this beautiful courtyard with one of those long stone tables that you see in those Tuscan outdoor dining settings. And the table was laid with all this beautiful French fare, the baguettes, the meats, the cheeses. And there was the adult side of the table, end of the table, and the kids side. And I remember getting given a small glass with a little bit of red liquid in the bottom and then topped up with water. It turned out that at the age of 9 years old, I was being given my first taste of red wine. Over in France, it's very common to expose children to alcohol in this way at the dinner table. Now, that in itself is quite surprising to me, that when I look back and think my impressions at that age were, it was something that I needed to grow into. It was something that I needed to learn how to do properly when I was older. And surprisingly, perhaps, if we look at the statistics, the levels of alcoholism or alcohol use disorder in countries like France don't seem to be quite as severe as they are in other countries where perhaps alcohol isn't introduced at such a young age and in such a way. But what else do we know about alcohol now that perhaps if we'd been taught it when we were younger, we would have been less inclined to drink it as exuberantly as perhaps we do in countries like the UK, the USA, and Australia? One of the things that I wish I'd known more about was the calorie content. I worked out not that long ago that I was drinking possibly the equivalent of a Big Mac and fries most evenings. Now, if you'd asked me, was I somebody that would indulge in Big Macs and fries? I would be a categorical no. I'm far too concerned about my weight and obviously a bit more concerned about what's in those particular products. But hey, give me a glass of ethanol, diluted ethanol, and I'll happily consume at least 2 or 3 of those. So the calorie content in alcohol is really quite high. It contains almost as many calories per gram as pure fat. So imagine you're drinking a glass of pure butter. Ew. To give some context, a Big Mac from McDonald's contains around 540 calories. So if you are somebody that likes a Long Island iced tea, know that just depending obviously on the exact recipe and serving size, that can contain up to 600 calories due to that combination of spirits. Pina coladas, White Russians, anything with liqueurs and cream, as you can imagine, highly dense in calories, and even a classic margarita. If you make it with sugary mixers and added syrups, it can range from up to 500 to 600 calories. So whilst we might think that we're just having a nice healthy beverage or light beverage, a nice Long Island iced tea, just imagine a Big Mac sitting next to it. Would you indulge? The other thing that I thought was interesting was fries. If you think about the McDonald's fries, we've got 230 calories in a small serving of McDonald's fries. So for every light beer that you're consuming, you're just knocking back a nice hot pack of McDonald's fries. Now, dry wine, 150 ml serve, let's face it, most people are not drinking the serving size. I certainly wasn't at the time that I was drinking. Has about 130 calories in a glass, which is, you have 2 of those, you've just consumed a nice big serving of McDonald's fries. And even vodka soda, which is historically known to be the drink that we can have without the guilt, still has about 70 calories in a small glass. So if you're drinking 3 or 4 of those, just think about that Big Mac. Now, the other thing about alcohol that isn't often talked about is what we call metabolism priority. What that means is that when you drink alcohol, your body immediately prioritizes the metabolism of the alcohol over any other thing that you've consumed. Why does it do that? Well, the body is very intelligent and it recognizes immediately the poisonous nature of alcohol, of ethanol. And so it panics and it says, okay, of all the things that I need to get out of this person, the number one thing is this highly toxic substance. The metabolism of all other nutrients in your system, including the Big Mac and fries that we talked about earlier, gets put on hold. The fats, the proteins, the carbohydrates. And as a result, based on and depending on how much alcohol your body needs to process so that you don't die from alcohol poisoning, is that the other nutrients get stored potentially in the body, and that is why we can start to see that beer belly start to grow, those love handles, those extra pounds on the top of the thighs. You know what I'm talking about. So whilst we might feel like we're drinking and so it's not as bad as solid food, it really does take its toll. Your metabolism is hijacked by the alcohol, and so the calories that are metabolized from alcohol are also processed differently to the other macronutrients. When alcohol is consumed in excess, the calories are stored as fat. And I think it's important that we know that. The other thing that plays into this is that alcohol is a diuretic. What that means is that it increases the production of urine. Those of you that have heard the expression, don't break the seal, that's always was talked about back in the drinking days, where you would just drink and you knew that the minute that you went to the bathroom, that was it for the rest of the night. You would have to be going to the bathroom every 5 minutes. So alcohol does increase urine production, which leads to dehydration, and that obviously affects the overall levels of hydration in the body. And when we're dehydrated, we are not metabolizing properly. Therefore, weight gain is another component, another byproduct of the alcohol consumption. And alcohol, of course, affects our blood sugar levels. So it can initially cause that spike in blood sugar, which is the surge of energy that we sometimes feel when we're drinking. But of course, in the long term, it just creates a blood sugar roller coaster. in the same way that a chocolate bar or any high sugar food product creates highs and lows in our blood sugar. Alcohol is exactly the same, and it does lead to those feelings afterwards, as you will all know quite well if you're drinking a reasonable amount, of flatness, of lack of energy, and worst case, that terrible hangover after a night of drinking. So if you are somebody that is interested in weight management in a healthy way, then alcohol consumption is not going to serve you in any positive way. Despite what people may think, alcohol is also not a stimulant. As I mentioned before, in regards to blood sugar levels, yes, it does give us blood sugar level spikes, but it is not a stimulant. Alcohol is a depressant. It is a substance that slows down our central nervous system and the function of our brain. So whilst you might feel initially a sense of energy, maybe some more confidence shortly after drinking alcohol, the overall effect is one of a depressant. What it does is it acts on our central nervous system by slowing down our brain function and brain activity. It inhibits or prevents the transmission of signals between our nerve cells, which leads to our brain slowing down, our ability to think clearly is impaired, our muscles start to become a bit relaxed and floppy, and our body functions generally slow down. So many people talk about how alcohol gives them this feeling of relaxation and calm and sometimes even a sense of euphoria. But these effects are not due to the stimulant, but the depressive impact on the nervous system. As we drink more and more quantities of alcohol, this further enhances or reinforces these depressant effects, and over time can lead to impaired coordination even when we're not drinking. It can also reduce our ability to control our impulses, not just in the short term, but even at times when we're not actually consuming alcohol. And of course, if we drink excessive amounts in one go, it can completely shut us down in the form of blacking out or lack of consciousness. So it's important to know that alcohol is not a stimulant but a depressant. It may appear that it increases our alertness and activity, but actually that's merely a byproduct of the high sugar levels in alcohol. Substances like caffeine or amphetamines are stimulants. They're the ones that increase activity and alertness in our nervous system. But alcohol does the opposite. It depresses us and it slows us down. What about this thing called tolerance? I'm sure you know some people that literally will have one or two drinks and they'll say things like, oh, I feel tired and sleepy, or that's enough for me, or I just couldn't drink anymore. And you wonder, well, I did anyway, with incredulously, how can they not want to have another drink? I am somebody who gets extremely motivated once I have a couple of drinks. I'm fired up, I'm ready to go, and I could keep going. But that just comes down to individual tolerance.
Hi, I'm James Swanwick. Have you downloaded my free Alcohol Freedom Formula yet? If not, you can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide. You can download it. It will outline the same process that we walk our clients through in our flagship 90-day stop drinking program. You'll also get an email from me each day with tips and tricks to reduce or stop drinking, to improve your health, nutrition, mobility, and lots of other great mindset techniques. That's alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide.
Alcohol tolerance does vary very widely between different types of people, between genders, between different genetic makeup, body composition, and even ethnicity. Some people can metabolize alcohol more efficiently than others, and some people, the alcohol takes a really long time to metabolize through their system. So if somebody speaks to being the type of person that can only have one or two before they fall asleep, it's not that they have more willpower. It is simply that alcohol affects them in a very different way for a whole host of different reasons. I often hear certain people in my life proudly telling me that they've never felt the need to drink a lot of alcohol. And whilst I would never say this directly, there's nothing to be proud of, because if you don't get the stimulation from alcohol that some people do, then of course you are not going to want to drink more of it. Alcohol and people that struggle with alcohol use disorder tend to be the people that get quite energized by it. They're not the people who drink it and fall asleep. They're the people who will have a couple of drinks and feel a sense of energy rising, confidence, motivation, all the inhibitions go away, and they don't feel tired. And as time goes on, even if somebody did feel slightly tired in the early days, we build our tolerance up over time. So you need more of the substance to get the same effect. So individual tolerance is exactly what I'm saying. It's very individual. Do not make a judgment about somebody based on their ability or inability to consume a certain amount of alcohol. All you can do is pay attention to your own tolerance. If you find that the glass of wine that used to give you a nice buzz is not enough anymore and you're needing one or two more, then that's the time to start paying attention, because your tolerance to the will be going up. And the higher the tolerance, the more alcohol you'll need. And to add to that, if you are starting to notice that you are switching from your regular wine or beer over to spirits, that's really an indication that the tolerance levels are getting really high and that you need more alcohol in order to get the result that you're after. So tolerance is something to pay attention to, and it varies greatly between individuals. Another important thing to know about alcohol is that it affects adolescents' brains much more than it does an adult brain. This is why exposing children to alcohol at a young age is not a very good idea, even if they're 9 years old and it's red wine mixed with water, in my humble opinion. But adolescent brains, are much more susceptible to the damaging effects of alcohol because their brain has not had enough time to fully develop. And they're especially in those areas of the brain where we are talking about decision making, impulse control, and the ability to regulate our feelings, to regulate our emotions. Alcohol can interfere with these crucial developmental processes, and at its worst, it can disrupt brain growth. I was drinking, one would argue, quite excessively at the age of 15, and my impulse control is shocking. If there's a plate of biscuits on the table, I want to eat them. If there's a packet of chips, I want to eat the whole thing. Donuts, pastries at work, I find myself struggling in all environments where temptation is there. Now, I'm 50 years old and I've managed to temper my impulsivity through various different practices over the years, but I do wonder if maybe I hadn't been exposed to alcohol at such a young age, would my impulse control be better? Would I have not suffered as much as I did with things like alcohol consumption and weight management? Because my ability to firstly regulate my feelings, calm myself down, soothe myself when I was stressed out was really not great. I was never taught how to do that. And so I used food initially to do that, and then turned to cigarettes and then to alcohol. And also my ability to say no to various different things, my ability to control that primal urge to do something, even though I knew it was bad for me, was very underdeveloped. So it's really important to know that children under the age of, let's say, 21, because we're mainly in the US, we do not want to be exposing them to alcohol because it does damage key developmental processes and parts of their brains. It also affects their ability to pay attention, to problem solve, their learning and memory. And as we can see from statistics, there is an increased risk and high risk taking activities because they're not as thoughtful. Their smart brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that makes good decisions, has not fully developed. They can have an increased risk of addiction if they start drinking earlier. So, bottom line is, if you can, and if it's not too late, do not expose your children intentionally to alcohol until their brain is ready for it. Ideally, don't do it at all. But if you are going to, then be very conscious about when, where, how much, who with, and most importantly, educate them in a way that perhaps you weren't educated, so that they can make an informed decision. So to recap, alcohol is pretty calorie dense. And if you are conscious about weight management, if nothing else, then alcohol is something that you really want to take a look at, because even though it may seem like it's relatively innocent, it's highly calorific. Just as a reminder, one Big Mac, 540 calories, one Long Island iced tea equates to a Big Mac, and a light beer to a pack of McDonald's fries, just as a reminder. The other thing that we talked about was metabolism priority. So if you've eaten that Big Mac and fries and then you chug it down with a nice cold beer, the body is going to immediately ignore the Big Mac and fries and go directly to the beer to metabolize it. This is, as I mentioned before, because the body recognizes alcohol as the most destructive, the most poisonous substance that's come in, and therefore the one that needs to be eliminated and eradicated as quickly as possible. And the energy transported throughout the body and ultimately ending up in fat cells. So there you go. Good to know. The other thing that we discussed was the impact of alcohol on young minds. And the more educated we become about this, the more shocking it is when we look at the alcohol industry and the way it targets young people with these high sugar alcoholic drinks in order to get them hooked whilst they're too young to know any different. Reality is, when you're drinking at an age of under 21, your brain is not ready to deal with the negative impacts of the substance. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain, the most precious perhaps part of your brain that makes us human instead of animals, is the part of the brain that gets damaged. the part that involves conscious, considered decision making, ability to manage our impulses, to handle our emotions, becomes impacted by alcohol. If we are drinking at an age where that part of the brain is underdeveloped, that impact is a lot more extreme than it is in an adult. Of course, as an adult, this part of the brain is also affected, but we've had a bit more time to work on those areas and to fully develop physically in that area. Young people have not had that time, and therefore the impact of alcohol is a lot more detrimental. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found the information helpful, and I look forward to sharing more information with you in another episode.